Hello, I'm Robert, fact checker and science blogger, and let's just maximize this. I'm just going to bring up this. It's rather good news, that kind of projection, and this is just based on existing technology. It's not based on assuming we find new technologies, of the way that the cost of renewables are going down still. That's concentrated solar. That's when you've got mirrors reflecting. Nowadays, most of the new solar plants are actually solar photovoltaic because they cost less, and they're going down like that. And then the onshore wind is going down, and the offshore wind is going down. And this is the range of prices. The grey is the range of prices for fossil fuels. And you can see by 2030, this is going to cost well below the lowest cost fossil fuels by 2030. And then the even offshore wind is right down the bottom range by 2030. And so by time when we're in the 2030s, it's going to be quite difficult to actually get a new fossil fuel plant built. Not only that, what you've got to bear in mind is that fossil fuel plants, you have to constantly, most of the cost of a fossil fuel plant is while it's running, while most of the cost of renewables is when it's built, and there's very little overhead. This means that as soon, and we already saw this in the pandemic, when there was reducing demand on electricity, then it's the fossil fuel plants that closed down because they were losing money all the way through, because they weren't getting enough money to pay for the electricity, whereas the renewables, then it doesn't matter, even if they get a small amount in, it's still paying back on the construction costs, and they make money all the time, even with very small amount of income. They're still making money. And so if it gets to a point where these are competitive with fossil fuels, and sometime in the mid-2020s, 2030, fossil fuel plants are going to start closing down, because they just can't if the prices for electricity go too low for them, then they're losing money every day that they're running. So they've got no choice, they have to close down. So we should see quite a big transition by 2030 in the direction of renewables, far faster than just the natural change of the plants having to build new plants. And by 2030 then, even gas may well be which is the lowest cost fossil fuels, that may well be struggling to compete with the renewables. Now, this is just based on the technology we already know, but it's particularly solar photovoltaic, then that has actually dropped tenfold in price, way up there, since in the last decade, and they're just projecting modest halving in price in the next decade, although for the last decade it dropped tenfold. And the reason is because there's just huge improvements. It's much more efficient solar panels made with less materials, and the materials cost less, easier to maintain, longer lasting panels, and more renewable. And all that is happening, and it's just lots and lots of small incremental changes that lead to them becoming more and more efficient, and much easier to make. And there's one possible game changer level of thing that's going to happen, is that that's got Perovskite. Look, this is a huge reduction in the solar panels costs. Let's just pick that up. Come up. Oh yes, that's because I do it full screen. It's going to take a while to come. Yeah, let's bring it up. So that's that's concentrated solar, and this is the photovoltaic, and that's how it's gone down like that, from nearly 40 US dollars per kilowatt hour down to about 4, so a tenfold reduction since 2010. And so that's what's happened. I'm going to go to the other one, so that's what I wanted to show you, and make sure I pick up the right one in that graph. And yes, then so I already talked about Perovskite before, so you can go look at my video. But this is really a big game changer, and we've actually got a plant in China that is already starting to do it commercially in a very small scale commercial. And if that really takes off, then that's going to be another halving in price in just another couple of years, which is pretty much, it's like it halved in price from 2010 to 2012, right? So it wouldn't be too surprising if it halved in price again from 2020 to 2022. It's entirely possible, and perovskite could be the technology that does that. And it's not only that it's be about half the price, it would also be much, much easier to make. Very low cost. You basically make a kind of a paint that you paint on something. Far lower technology than the way they're doing it now. And this is technology that they could actually be making solar panels in Africa, and then they're very portable. Like you can roll them up and then carry them away to some remote part of the Sahara Desert, lay out your panel, and then your village has got electricity during the daytime. And for a remote area in the sub-Saharan desert, that would be a huge change. And they could do all sorts of things with the electricity. And then you've got the batteries, that's equalising it. I guess more complicated, but if you're in a remote area where you've never had electricity before, then to have it in daytime from solar panels and the things you can do with that. So there's going to be, so then we get people saying, oh, but we can never have all of the electricity be renewables. You've got to have nuclear power, and you've got to have baseload power. You don't need baseload power for renewables, they don't help. Baseload power is something just going on and on all the time. But renewables, then they need something that can respond very quickly. Nuclear power plants can't respond quickly. Only gas power plants can respond very quickly of the conventional. So nuclear power is not a natural match for renewables at all. It can't supplement renewables. It can only be a portion of your total. You still, for any renewables you still have to have the peaking power balancing. And the best way to do that, the lowest cost of all, although it does take some years to build this if it doesn't exist already, but it's the far the lowest cost fraction of the cost of any other method of doing that, is by pumped hydro storage. If you've got a hydroelectric already, it's a very natural partner that you have a solar power plant next to the hydro, and then when you've got lots of solar, you pump the water back up. If you can put that capability into your hydro dam, and then it goes down again at night. So that's a very natural way to partner them together and basically double the power output from your hydro plant. But you can also build these things build these things even with the sea as the lowest reservoir, and you could do that. And then you can also have mine shafts and basically just flood a mine shaft and pump it from one mine shaft to another. So there are lots of ways of doing that, and there are many other ways of balancing the power, and they don't take up more land area than fossil fuels. I'm from the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom is currently producing, I'm from Scotland, and Scotland is currently producing close to 100% of its renewables, of its electricity from renewables. The electricity I'm using to record this is from grid power that is close to 100% renewables. And then, so this can be done. The countries are showing it can be done. And it's just not true at all. If you look at wind turbines, they have almost zero footprint. So lots of wind turbines around in Scotland on land. The ones that offshore wind have no footprint at all. The ones on the land have almost no footprint. You have your animals grazing or whatever it is at the bottom, and they hardly notice them. And that's most of what we're using in Scotland. Then for solar power, an awful lot of the solar power is on people's roofs. It's on brownfield areas. It can be floating on hydro dams. It can be on canals, which helps to reduce evaporation. In California, they have a very large canal network, and one of their plans is to cover those with solar panels, which will both reduce evaporation and give them a large area of solar panels. There's the desert, where there's grassland, especially in hot places, and if you have some shading from solar panels with gaps between the solar panels, then that helps with the grass to grow. So it can actually be beneficial if it's very dry and hot. Then in some places where it's semi-arid, then solar panels can help the grass to grow by giving it a bit of shading. So it's just not true that renewables for power generation take up more land. It's just not true at all. And then it turns out that, and some countries are not going to use nuclear at all. New Zealand is nuclear free. They don't have nuclear power plants. They have a policy of never using nuclear power plants. So they are not going to use nuclear power at all. And the other countries have various amounts of nuclear power. Personally, I think nuclear power is okay as long as you're very careful, because they've discovered much better ways of disposing of the radioactive waste. I used to be very much against it, but since they've so much improved the ways and converting high yield waste, high radioactivity waste to low radioactivity waste, if they do that, then I think it's more acceptable. I don't think we should leave massive problems for future generations, thousands of years in the future. That was my main concern with nuclear power. The actual amount of radiation is not huge compared with the world as a whole, because the sea is naturally radioactive anyway, and our bodies are naturally radioactive. You can reduce the numbers very low. Then I don't think you need to be worried about nuclear power if it's dealt with responsibly. But I think that, but it's not actually a natural match. It's especially ramping up nuclear power. It takes an awful long time to build a new nuclear power plant. It's much faster to build a new renewables power plant than a new nuclear power plant. Much faster to make it, and it's got you don't need the fuel. They've dealt with many of the issues that people had as problems with renewables before. And anyway, we're coming into the with the recovery from the recession. Many countries, including the EU and the United States, and that's Biden's plan as well, they're going to use the recovery from the recession caused by COVID to rebuild, to build back better. With you need, in order to recover from a recession, then what you need best is something that involves employing a lot of people, giving a lot of people work, so they've got an income, so they can go start buying things to start the economy going round and round again. You need them to build things of lasting value. So you could employ them all to make pyramids or something like copy the Egyptians. That would stimulate your economy to some extent, but they're not producing anything of great value, so it's very limited in its effect. So if you can produce something that is of huge value, then that makes it a much stronger and better, more lasting recovery. And it turns out that making renewable power stations is and integrating home insulation and work to preserve nature services and reducing the loss of biodiversity and improving nature services. These are all things that have lasting value for your society and that employ large numbers of people, can get lots of people back to work very quickly, and then these people are then producing something of lasting value to their society, which is going on and on, and continue to feed back benefits into the society. That is the way to do an especially strong and stable recovery. And so many countries, even if they're not especially in favour of renewables, they just look at the economics and the numbers make sense. So even if they're not especially, and most people are quite strongly behind the Paris Agreement now, but even ones where not so much, then you just look at the numbers, and so we are seeing quite a lot of. There's definitely going to be a component of renewables, and so it's a case of some countries are emphasising that and going really all out on renewables. That's including the EU and the United States under Biden are going to try to do that. And then some countries, they're certainly going to have an element of that. So there's going to be a boost for renewables during the recession in I think just about all countries, because it's a sensible thing to do. And it's just a question of how much of an element it is in individual countries, and some are really going overboard. Not going overboard, sorry, that's the wrong word. I mean, it's gone too far. Are really really taking this on in a big way, but should feed back to their economies and make their economies much stronger. So the EU, by investing strongly in renewables in order to recover, then it should see benefits in 5, 10, 15 years in the future, indeed for the duration of these things they're building. and so it makes a lot of economic sense. And so the situation does look very good for renewables, I think. And so anyway, I'll upload this, and so this is very positive news. So yes, just go back to this. So quick recap. So just this is just with conventional, without assuming any advances in technology, just based on what we have already. Then they have it halving by 2030. But if it's particular solar photovoltaic, then people say, you see, the thing is with solar photovoltaic, it's got to the point where if you have a home, your solar panels at home, it actually costs more to install, the same amount to install as the actual panels cost, because the panels gone down so much in cost. But so the only way forward after that is installation, making installation much easier, and this Perovskite does that. So it's much easier. It's very you could I mean, when we start having it in the UK, then you'll be able to order like you order carpet, you order rolls of Perovskite panels and lay it out on a shed or something, and you probably get home hobbyists doing that easily and things. You know, I don't know quite how it's going to go, but I mean, if they can do it in sub-Saharan desert and carrying bulls and camels or whatever it is they do to get into the place, then for sure it's going to be much easier in the United Kingdom. So so that is that idea. They thought, you know, this is pretty much the limit, because we've hit the limits that for home installation, and it could halve again for power plants, because they've got the economies of scale, and that's basically what this is sort of. And various other economies of ways of making it much more efficient, making the panels and installing them and so on, doing all sorts of things. You can reduce it in a big way, especially on the big power plants. And then, but if we've got more game changers coming, like we had for the last decade, then halving isn't the limit. We could go down and down quite a lot more further. And just think what that would do. Halving in 2 years would be a huge challenge for fossil fuels. And then if we halve again, you know, it would just not make sense to use fossil fuels anymore. Very hard to keep it going. And people have always been underestimating the, especially solar photovoltaic. For the last 10 years, they've underestimated. Ask in 2010, nobody would have guessed that we'd be down to 4 cents from 40 cents in just 10 years. And so, how far down is it going to go? 2 cents seems quite likely per kilowatt hour, and you know, it's likely to keep on going down beyond that. And it might even be 2 cents by the mid-2020s. So it's starting off. So it's going to take a while for the Perovskite panels if it is a success, spread around the world. But we could be seeing that you get 2 cents, then eventually 1 cent per kilowatt hour. Who knows? So anyway, that's in US 2019 US dollars. Sorry, megawatt hours. Sorry, I'm nearly saying megawatt hour. Wow. Yeah, megawatt hour, sorry. Per megawatt hour for commercial power station. Oh no, that's a different graph. Yes, sorry, I'm just getting mixed up. That's a different graph. Anyway, it's way reduced. That's 50 watts per $50 per megawatt hour. Which is about where it is. And then so. I'm just trying to square that up with that other graph, but anyway, I better I'll just stop this. And I'm sure they got it right. I just with my mathematical curiosity, I'm wondering how the two graphs match to each other. Anyway, I'll upload this and see what you make of it.